Cool Hand Speedco frame. It's a frame that I handmade. In these I run an overhead valve converted Harley-Davidson flathead engine. So it's a Harley-Davidson flathead engine that came flathead from the factory in the 1930s. And I make an overhead valve conversion for it, which increases horsepower by about 50%. Quite an increase. So you have to make a special frame because the flathead engine is very short, but with the overhead valve conversion, it becomes really tall, so I have to make my own frames for them. I'm gonna race this bike out at the Bonneville Salt Flats. So for racing, I don't need a big set of street fuel tanks like I would normally run on this bike, so I'm gonna run a small 1930s style triangle tank like this one. This is a steel triangle tank from the late 1920s, actually, from a JAP British racer. But I'm gonna make an aluminum tank like this. And I want you to check out the procedure of how I make the panels for this gas tank. I made a template for my gas tank side panels from a manila folder. So this is the exact size that the tank is gonna be. And I'll show you a few little tricks along the way as I do this, but watch how I turn this piece of paper into a metal fuel tank. I cut this sliver off of a sheet of 3003 aluminum, which is the material I'm gonna use to make the tank. I'm just gonna trace the outline of my template onto the aluminum. And these will become my two side panels. I'm just gonna cut these pieces out in my vintage Beverly shear. Here's my aluminum tank halves. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna clamp them together real close, just like this. And I'm just gonna fusion weld this entire seam around the outside. I got my two halves welded together, and I put a hole here on this one half. Now I'm gonna go ahead and weld on this threaded bung. Okay, so here's the plan for shaping my little triangle tank. I'm gonna hydroform it using PowerHorse pressure washer that I got from Northern Tool. I originally got it to clean my trailer, but it might be a real quick and easy way to hydroform this metal, because hydroforming is a really quick and efficient way to shape metal. I got a pressure line into my two panels that are welded together. I'm gonna fire up the pressure washer, connect the nozzle, see what happens. Now, if I tried to pump this up with just air, it would explode. You know, the air would compress and then explode, but the water won't do that. There's gonna be a little bit of air in the water. I have to be aware of that. But this is gonna happen really quick, because I'm gonna put a lot of water into a very small vessel. So this should happen pretty quick. So let's fire this up, connect it, and see what happens. Check this out. Just a little bit of water pressure in there. You can see how it's really shaped my tank panel sides. I'm gonna go for a little more volume and see what happens, but I mean, if I was shaping this by hammer and hand, this would take me an hour to do this, and I've been on this thing for seconds. So I'm gonna add a little more pressure and see how we do. It was inevitable that all that pressure is gonna have to go somewhere. So I split my seam a little bit on the bottom, which is fine because I gotta split this open anyway to weld it. But really cool how that water just filled this. I mean, I can do a much larger tank and I could do all kinds of things to soften the metal up to get my bends, but this gives me a really good start and give me compound curves. And I would have to work with some pretty sophisticated methods and equipment to shape that metal, and the hydroforming just did it within a matter of seconds. Pretty amazing. I honestly didn't expect that. I just didn't expect that, so that's really great. All right, so now I'm just gonna go ahead and sand right through the seams that I welded on the edge and get that gone. And split these two halves apart and kind of finish them out. There's sanded those edges and I just kind of start to peel this apart. And it just fractures right there. And there's my two halves. I'm gonna go ahead and clean these up and get them ready to weld together on the center section of my tank. I've got my Hydroform tank halves here. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up these edges. I'm gonna do a little shaping here with my Bailey planishing hammer. I'm just gonna work the perimeter edge of the tank right now. Really getting a bulbous shape to it. It's really bowing out the center now. Before, the edges were restricted by the weld, so it was bending away from the weld. But now that I'm able to go ahead and shape on the edges too, it's really giving this tank some depth. I get the shape I want with the hydroforming and with the planishing hammer. The planishing hammer puts a little bit of dents and there's some high spots and low spots in the panel. So I'm gonna smooth it out on the English wheel. The English wheel just uses the pinch force between the two wheels to roll my metal through, and the high spots and the low spots are evened out by the action of the wheels. And you can shape on this too, but mainly right now I'm using it just to smooth out this panel so it's not rough. Trim this piece of 3003 down with a nibbler to make the center section of the tank. I'll bend my center section of the tank over a piece of aluminum pipe. But I get a real nice fit on the side panel. And the theory is if it fits one side, it'll fit the other side because both side panels should be identical. I mark my bend points with a Sharpie and a straight edge one, so I bend square so that the center section doesn't get out of alignment on me. And two, just to give me a reference. I use a smaller piece of pipe to bend the back section of the tank because it's a smaller radius. Okay, so I stitched the loop. The seam's on the bottom, so the top will be nice and clean. That's what you're going to see. Now I got my top panel set on there, and I'm just going to clamp it, hold it, and start to tack weld it all the way around. I'll do one side, then the other side. And there's the triangle-shaped Bonneville race tank in the cool hand frame. I got it all welded together and pressure tested. I still got to put the filler cap and the mounts on it, but you can see how the Hydroform gave me that compound curve so quick with that pressure cleaner. Really amazing how fast that worked. I'm going to use it more often.